The brutal truth about landing a tech job is that learning to code is just not enough. So many people I meet, they've sacrificed so much time and energy just learning to code, right? Learning to code. And then they discover to their horror that the real career change battle begins after all the tutorials. Now, in this podcast, I'm going to talk to you about why the tech job hunt is a ruthless game, especially when you have no track record and how to actually win. I know because I went from a 37-year-old lawyer to a software engineer eventually at Google because I understood and I learned the hard way. Welcome to Easier Said Than Done with me, Zubin, where I share with you the tens of thousands of dollars worth of self-development that I did on my journey from 37-year-old lawyer to professional software engineer. The goal of this podcast is to show you how to actually do those things that are easier said than done. Hey everybody, Zubin again here today, and today what I'm going to talk to you about, or rather I'm going to walk you through, is how to master the entire career change process into software engineering, not just the coding part. Okay, that's literally one of the earlier parts of it. There are many stages after that. In fact, in another episode of this podcast, I talk about the 7 stages to career change. It's common to all career change, but especially for code, it's very, very important that you understand that the learning to code part is like step 2 or something out of 7 stages. Okay. Anyway, so why should you want to learn about the entire career change, career transition process? Well, because the dream, presumably, is not just to learn to code. Like if that's your goal, then you've got the wrong goal. Your goal is to actually work as a software engineer, which means you actually have to get hired and paid compared to the market and beat the market to be a software engineer. Okay. Now, the benefits of having this end-to-end worldview, this complete picture, is immense. You're going to avoid this devastating cycle that so many people who come to me are stuck in, the cycle of endless learning to code, but not having any interviews, 0 job prospects, or worse, taking some real horrible dead-end, semi-coding kind of jobs that builds their career into nothing. Like it's a dead end, right? And I want to save you the countless hours of wasted effort and help you significantly accelerate your path to a fulfilling and high-paying, rewarding career in tech. I need to tell you, you need to plan for the stage after the theory. Okay, this is really important. There are many stages after the theory and tutorials and toy app stage, right? You need to plan for all that. The stage that you're trying to get to is the stage where you're actually an engineer, which means you're employed in a role where you're not just coding, by the way. That's only a small part of what the software engineering job is, right? Engineering is so much more than just coding. It's so much more, okay? And unfortunately, that is where so many mid-career folks who are trying to change into software engineering get so badly blindsided and never quite make it. They spend months, often years, to be honest, doing bootcamps and immersion tutorials and personal projects and building yet another portfolio project and sacrifice personal time with family, and they lose time with their kids or whatever, just trying to push through all these complex concepts, and they're just not prepared for what the real world is, and that's why they don't get any opportunities, no jobs, no success. And this can go on for months and years, like I said, right? And it's a harsh reality. When you don't get a single interview and you spend 8 to 12 months not being with your family or sacrificing a lot of your personal time, it's a pretty bitter pill to swallow. And all of this is because they've misunderstood that learning to code, while a monumental and critical, unavoidable first step, is literally the first step. The real game is the job hunt. And that's an entirely separate and arguably, in my opinion, harder, more challenging phase of the transition, because the competition is unpredictable, whereas code is very predictable, right? If you write the same code, I write the same code, we're going to get identical results. If you and I walk into the same job interview, we're going to get different results, right? And just to be clear, I'm not saying that I will succeed and you won't. I'm saying that we will get different results. I may fail and you may succeed, even if we know more or less the same things. Because that's kind of how life is in interviewing, right? And I've been hiring and interviewing for years now. And I can tell you that when you get to the top 5 or 10, people, typically for the roles I've sort of advertised, have been, more than 1,200 people. Typically by the time you're the top 5 or 10, it's hard to tell the difference usually when you're that good or you've made it through that many filters. And so at that point of time, it's really not about the code. You assume the code's there because they're all that good. But how do you even get into that top 10 or the top 5 is the real key. And that's a whole separate campaign, right? And most people never think about that. What happens after I learn to code? They sort of just assume that there's going to be this magical moment where opportunities fall from the sky into the lap, and it's not like that. Okay, so let's talk about all these reasons. Now, the primary reason, and there are 5, but the primary reason why people aren't getting interviews is because the modern job market, and it's been like this for at least 20, 25 years, is extremely efficient at connecting opportunities. So there's lots of applications. And look, this is the hard truth. Job hunting, standing out, securing a recruiter's interest, and ultimately even getting hired is, in my opinion, genuinely harder than just the learning to code bit, okay? And that's true in any industry, by the way. The actual core skill is fairly predictably achievable through a good textbook and a serious and a well-structured curriculum, right? But in tech, it's particularly hard because it's actually not too hard to acquire the basic skills to be functional. And therefore, there is competition and it's high demand, which drives more competition. And as a career changer, without a track record, it's really hard to stand out. It requires a very specific kind of plan that's tailored to your target market and to the kind of person you are, and frankly, how much time you have. That's why in the Inner Circle program, we spend so much time understanding the individual. We spend weeks, not like 2 or 3 weeks. We're talking 8 to 10 weeks, just understanding the individual, what their life context is, what their goals are. And only then do we build a plan, okay? Now, I want you to keep in mind, from a recruiter's point of view, the application process is very hard work. I mean, even when I'm hiring, it's really hard because typically you have hundreds, like I said, sometimes more than 1,000. When I was at Google, it was thousands, right? Thousands of applications. And every role has, hundreds, if not thousands of applications. And you have to figure out how to get through them. So most recruiters, when they're faced with that, of course, they're going to assume you know how to code. Like, why else are you applying for the job, right? That's an absolute minimum requirement. That's not enough to help you get the job. Obviously, that's the ticket to the dance, the minimum requirement. It's not the qualification in itself, right? It's just the minimum. So how would that be enough to get their attention? It isn't. You're trying to break into a highly competitive field. Don't forget that. And often you're competing with armies of established and experienced coders, of which you may be the least experienced, probably with no experience if you're a career changer. And so if your strategy begins and ends with, I know how to code, well, it's fine to begin with that, but it's a problem to end with that because that means you don't know how the job market works. Just like knowing how to play basketball is not enough to be in the NBA, knowing how to play the guitar is not enough to be a rock star, right? Knowing how to code is not enough to be a software engineer. And so if you've never been on the hiring side, then I understand that this may be news to you, which is why I do these podcasts. And frankly, not knowing something is exactly why it becomes really important to know how things actually work. Because if you don't know something, then you're flying blind. It's your responsibility to find out how the world actually works. And so that's why I started the Inner Circle mentorship program 5 years ago. And that's why this podcast started a year ago, to try and get most of you to understand that it's not how people talk about it in TikTok. The real world, from the insider perspective, you can only learn about something from someone who's doing the thing you're trying to do. Not from someone who talks about that thing, but someone who's actually doing it, right? Now, I do have some bad news because I said learning to code is not enough, right? And hopefully by now you really understand that. Hi, if you want a no BS insight into how to change your career, whether to code or something else, and how to actually get job opportunities in tech, then please subscribe and like. It's no BS because I have zero incentive to mislead you. I just want to help you and give you tons of value so that you will consider working with me to get to your next career. Take a look at the description text below to learn more about the training I offer. But I do post content here regularly, and by subscribing and liking and hitting that notification bell, you will get to know when I post new industry insights for you. You'll also know within about 3 seconds if you want to learn more, but at least you won't miss out. Oh, and please follow me on LinkedIn too. I pretty much post there every single day. Just look for my name, Zubin Pratap. All right, so please like and subscribe to this channel, and let's get back to the episode. Now, I do have some bad news because I said learning to code is not enough, right? And hopefully by now you really understand that. But there are actually, in my opinion, 4 other critical reasons why aspiring coders struggle to make actionable, measurable, tangible progress in their career change to code. So reason number 1, I call it the curse of competition, right? Unless you know how to play, in which case you'll beat it. But here's a question I want you guys to reflect on. Even if you're visible, right? You have some sort of public persona and you've learned to code. How are you going to outcompete established software engineers with years of a real world track record in software engineering, and probably they have formal qualifications and professional experience when you don't? Now, you may think, oh, I have transferable skills. That's not true. The core skill is engineering. They have more of that. You may have transferable skills. They don't, but that doesn't matter as much as the core skill. That's the first thing. The transferable skill is icing on the cake. Now, you may say, oh, but maybe there's a hiring manager out there that's, going to take a chance at me. Look, hiring managers have bosses, and they have HR, and they have finance and other people to sort of explain themselves to. And hiring managers have a job to do. They have a team to run. It's extremely risky for a hiring manager to just take a chance on someone. So imagine what would you do in the same situation? Forget about even coding. Imagine you needed urgent car repairs, right? Would you choose someone who just learned off YouTube and finished a 6 months mechanics course online? Or would you choose someone with a few years of hands-on experience and a strong reputation? What would you do, right? Even if the person who is learning off YouTube, maybe they know more than enough to get the job done, right? Maybe they're plenty knowledgeable, got the right skills, but they have no track record. And yours is the first car they're going to work on. Ooh, that feels risky, right? So you'd do the same thing. You would naturally prefer people with more experience. So for a hiring manager, and it's important for you to remember the risk factor because we're going to talk about it later. For a hiring manager, bringing on a career changer, which means zero real world engineering experience, well, that's super risky. And so they're going to assume that the experienced candidate will deliver results probably more fast and more reliably and with less oversight, less management time, which minimizes the manager's risk, right? So you're kind of fighting an uphill battle already compared to other qualified engineers when you're a career changer. That's already just a fact of life, right? Unless you understand how to level that playing field. Now, reason number 2 is what I call the interview iceberg. Most people just focus on the tip of the iceberg, right? And so they think, oh, there's, a coding interview is doing some lead code or DSA stuff. And I can hands on heart tell you about, 70% of coding or technical interviews out there do not include DSA type problems. Okay. I know my all four first offers that I got did not actually need DSA because they were smaller companies. They didn't need to have that kind of filter. Again, I've talked about this in other episodes, which companies typically use DSA, when DSA, why DSA, what kind of filter it is, how to prepare, all of that. Because I had to do that for Google, and how I prepared for Google was completely different from any other job I've had before that in code. Similar to how I did for some, but I had to change my preparation strategy based on the company and based on the hiring practices. Like you have to do that. You have to know the target company, right? So interview iceberg. So even if you manage to land an interview, most aspiring developers and career changers are completely unprepared for the type of tech interview that it is. Okay. They're not even aware. Like I've counted personally 9 to 14 different types of coding interviews in tech. And it's unclear now because there are some hybrid types, especially with AI coming out and all that, right? And so let's say 10, okay, almost a dozen different types of coding interviews, give or take. And code is just the starting point. So if you're not sure what kind of interview you're going to do, you're kind of flying blind, right? How are you going to prepare? So you could land up to a game and, it looks like everyone's carrying a racket and you turn up to the game and you think it's badminton, but it's tennis, or the other way around. You hear about a bat and a ball and you turn up for a cricket game and it's actually baseball, right? It's not going to help. So you got to understand that most interviews aren't just about the coding. One round may be about the coding, but remember, interviews, especially in tech, are multiple rounds. Like most of the roles that I've been in tech have required at least 6 rounds. And that's typically because I've been in the big tech sector. But if you go to the smaller places, it may be as many as 3 or 4 rounds, right? Of which 1, maybe 2 are the technical ones. So you've got to know each of the interviews, and each interview process has many rounds, and you have to prepare for each round specifically, right? So in a professional context, it's not just about solving some complex, obscure DSA problem. It's about solving problems in a team setting, which includes communicating your thought process, navigating behavioral questions that probe into your history, and problem-solving approach demonstrated in your past. A lot of people make mistakes on this, and so when I train people in the inner circle, I'm very particular about this. There's a way to answer behavioral questions, and it's not meant to be hypothetical, okay? So you need to be really well prepared for this kind of stuff, because it doesn't matter how well you do the technical interview. If you show you're pretty poor on the behavioral stuff, you're not going to be a fit, right? So therefore, you even need to understand other non-technical concepts. And then there are sort of technical concepts like system design, but that aren't about code. It's about design and engineering. This is what the difference between coding and engineering is. And at Google, for example, when I was interviewing, they called me back for a second system design interview because they use system design as a way to figure your level. Hey, hope you're enjoying this episode. Listen, I bet you're tired of the social media BS, you're confused and overwhelmed, and all you want is for someone to just show you a clear path to a coding career, right? We get it. My partner Brian and I, we changed to code in our 30s, and we can help you do it too. Brian and I have done all sorts of engineering work from startups to Google, and now we've built an exclusive private mentorship program designed to get you from beginner to professional developer. Whether you've done a coding bootcamp, you have a computer science degree, or you're starting from zero, it doesn't matter. We'll build you a step-by-step and customized plan, not just for the coding stuff, but for the entire career change process. Look, I'll be honest, the program is not easy and it's not short, but if you do the work, you'll get results that will change your life, if that's what you want. Go to parsity.io/innercircle or find any of the links in the show notes, and you can schedule a free call with us. Speak to you there. And at Google, for example, when I was interviewing, they called me back for a second system design interview because they use system design as a way to figure your level. So they wanted to up level me, right? Because my first system design interview gave them the signal that maybe I was at a higher level than they thought I was at first. It wasn't the coding round, it was the system design round that they used to level me, right? So all of this stuff is stuff that prior coders have no experience and knowledge about. So when you get a coding interview, most people just get excited, they get anxious, they just prepare a few things, but they don't know how to prepare for it because they haven't done the due diligence. And in the Inner Circle program, we spend a lot of time training our students about, because there's so few students that we have, we can spend a lot of time with them just saying, okay, this is how you find out what to do for this interview. This is how you speak to the recruiter. These are the questions you ask. This is what these answers mean. This is what the hidden pitfalls are. This is what the opportunities are, all of that, right? Okay. Now, reason number 3 why a lot of people struggle with this change is that they follow the spray and pray, the spray and pray fallacy, right? And so what that means is they sort of believe that, okay, if I just keep hitting that apply button and apply to hundreds of jobs indiscriminately, eventually I'm going to land something, right? Well, no. Or if you land something, it'll be something that puts you in a career cul-de-sac, right? A dead-end road, because you have to be intentional about your job. Guys, you're not 20-something. If you're a career changer, you're probably not in your early 20s. Maybe you're in your late 20s, but most of the people who come to me are in their 30s, right? You cannot afford to do the spray and pray thing. You don't want to start off at the very bottom. If you can help it, you want to start off slightly higher than the very bottom. You don't want to be competing directly with a fresh grad, right? But the spray and pray thing will force you to do that. You have to be extremely intentional, extremely targeted, know where you want to try and come in. And that means research. So it's better to apply for 20 really good quality jobs than to apply indiscriminately for 200. It just is, okay? Now, without targeted applications, very well thought out resumes, and a genuine understanding of the target company's needs, your efforts are going to be diluted and frankly pointless, and your application is very easily dismissed. I cannot begin to emphasize to you, unless you've been on the other side, just imagine for a moment somebody put 200 applications on your desk. Okay, that'll be about a pile this high. Okay, and you've got a full-time job, because it's not like somebody's saying don't do your job while you're doing the hiring stuff. You've got to manage all of that, and you've got to read these applications. Just time how much it takes to read. You know what? Just time how much it takes to read your resume. Okay, and now multiply that by 200 and see how hard it is to actually review resumes. Okay, so the more you spray and pray, the worse you're making it for yourself, for the recruiter, etc. Look, just think about it this way. There's a reason why a premium brand like Apple does not do these letterbox drops or stand at the corner of busy streets and hand out flyers, okay? Because it's a horrible way to sell. It's a non-premium way to sell. That mass applying that people do is kind of like handing out flyers on high street, right? When you follow a strategy to approach the market, think about what a premium brand would do. Like, for example, Apple sells with something similar to what's known as reputational selling. And that's also what I teach in the Inner Circle program, right? You want your reputation to be the draw card, not your application. Okay, reason number 4, people struggle a lot, is a lack of strategic, deliberate thinking around the career change process. Okay, now, I changed careers after 15 years as a lawyer. Okay, I was in my late 30s. And when I did so from law to software engineering at Google, for example, it wasn't a simple pivot. It was a systematic, very strategic, multi-year process and campaign. Okay, it's a strategic campaign, and those are deliberate words that I'm using. Many folks try and do this tactically in a hurry without understanding or using data from the market to inform their strategic planning. And maybe they don't know and they don't know how. Understandable. But then when you don't know how and you assume that your method is likely to work because you saw it on a 30-second TikTok, that is kind of pure hope, and hope is not a strategy. Or worse, you'll end up taking any job just to leap into something that you got it to say, oh, I'm a developer, and you get no skills, or you're working in a stack or in an environment that does not build you at all, or you get stuck and drawn into some semi-paid or unpaid internship that's basically nothing more than free labor factories. Then what you're kind of doing is navigating by reaction, and you're losing time, and the opportunity cost, what you could have done with that time and that energy, is huge. You could have learned more, better things. You could have had a better relationship with somebody else that led to something else. Because time never comes back, you have to be very strategic, right, about how you use it, which means you need to have a clear roadmap, because a roadmap tells you ignore everything else, ignore every other path, because all of those are waste of time, right? So you need a clear roadmap for multiple campaigns, your networking campaign, your strategic campaign around what skills to acquire, how much of that to do, what not to acquire, what to ignore, which events matter, which events don't matter, which interview types matter, which interview types don't matter, which type of companies are right for your long-term goals, which type of companies are fit for your background, all of that. And you got to do all this without coming across as being completely risky to the hiring manager's point of view, right? So it takes a lot of deliberate effort. When I break it down like this, it sounds hard, because you suddenly realize, oh gosh, there are all these pieces to the puzzle. But that's true. When you take apart even something as simple as this remote control, right? Like, there's a lot of pieces in there. It looks pretty simple and straightforward, but there are lots of pieces in there. It's the same principle. But once you have the blueprint, then taking it apart and putting it back is suddenly no big deal, right? Once you have the instructions, it's like IKEA furniture. Without instructions, you're like, what the hell are all these pieces? But if someone gives you the instruction booklet, even if it's badly written, you just got to follow the dotted lines, so to speak, on the pictures, and you'll get there, right? It's the same thing with career change. Now, Remember, your big problem or the big thing that you're going to face is that a lot of your learning and struggling and reading will go to waste if you don't have the right strategy. So I always want you to be thinking in the back of my mind that this choice could be a very wasteful choice if it's not the right choice. Okay. And so without the right plan and strategic thinking, you will waste a ton of time. Very dangerous, because time is the one thing you cannot waste when you're changing careers. Why? Because you're already late to the game. Now, obviously, it's possible, even though you're late to the game. You've seen the evidence of a handful of people, including, for example, me, right, who've overcome these problems. And I'm not the only one. There are a few others, not a ton, but a few others. So it's clearly possible. Now, the question is how? Well, how is by understanding that there are clear rules to the labor market, not just in coding, in every labor market, in every country, and every city is actually a little bit different, but there are rules to the labor market. And so there are techniques and strategies, because where there are rules, there are techniques and strategies that will help you navigate those rules. Okay. And that's what will help you going from just being a passionate, keen learner to actually being gainfully employed as a software engineer, which is the goal. Okay. Now, let me give you what I would consider to be a 3-step guide, right? 3 steps to help you at a meta level understand how to do the career change thing. Okay. It's kind of a navigational guide. First one is you have to de-risk yourself. You have to show the hiring manager why you're the safer bet or the safest bet, or at least as safe a bet as your competition, despite your non-technical background. So it's absolutely critical for you to understand that your goal is to not just prove that you can code, they're going to take that for granted, but to de-risk yourself compared to established engineers. Really think about that. Okay. Now, since not all skills are transferable, we talked about this, or, even if they're transferable, they're not the main reason why you get hired, and they may not be immediately relevant to software engineering. So de-risking requires a very deep understanding of what the hiring manager is looking for beyond just your coding ability. Just because you have skills that you consider to be valuable doesn't mean the hiring manager does. You need to find the clues in every stage of the job interview process, which is why I say interviewing is not just the actual interview, but the process, the loop as we call it, of the interview process is where all the clues come up, right? And it starts from the job hunt stage, right? Even from the job description, there are clues if you know how to look for them, which will then guide your initial outreach and then your next step and your next step after that. The best candidates have mastered being able to match what the business is desperate for with their unique skills, and then showcasing those skills to say, hey, this is what you want, here's a fit, here's a match, right? And bring their skills front and center, because that's what has resonance to the hiring manager. For example, if a job description emphasizes scalable systems, right? You see this a lot, or customer empathy, or whatever it is, right? Don't just list that you've done a project. Explain how your project was planned, designed, and engineered to demonstrate scalability, or at least consider scalability, even if it is not actually a scalable project or it's a toy project. Show that you've thought about it, or how in your previous career, which demanded maybe a deep customer understanding of customer centricity, you brought those skills. So, for example, Sarah, right, one of the students, was a former supply chain manager, wanted to be a data analyst, and instead of just showing off SQL projects, she analyzed job descriptions carefully with our help to find companies desperate for efficiency and process improvement and ordering processes. Okay, so she then tailored her project narratives and her conversations with the recruiters to show how her previous experience as manager of the supply chain, combined with the data analytical skills, directly translate into identifying and solving bottlenecks in the business, which is the same kind of problem she'd experienced in the previous role. And now she's applying code to solve that. That's how she de-risked herself, by making herself unique and using the transferable experience, which is relevant to the hiring manager. So that proved undeniably that she would be a great person for the job, because she had deep insight into their problems. Okay. Step 2 is you want to try and master the unseen, invisible job market. Okay. Now, I want you guys to understand this. There's no clear statistic on this, because you'll see why. It's a problem of silent data. But recruiters estimate that somewhere between 30 and 60% of jobs are never advertised. Jobs available just get filled by, hey, I know someone, I've picked up the phone and they filled it before it ever got listed, or internally in the company, people move around and so it never got listed. Okay, so there's a lot of invisible job market going on, which means you need to stop blindly applying and mass applying and start strategically building relationships. And that's a long process. Now, we do that every day, every week, every month in the Inner Circle program, because we don't know when the opportunities are going to come. All we know is that luck is when opportunity means preparation. So we can control the preparation piece. The opportunity piece is a function of time and awareness of what's going on in the target market. Okay. Now, here's why so many aspiring coders go so wrong. They focus entirely and solely on online job boards and hitting that apply button, smashing it countless times, and then wondering why they hear nothing back. Okay. It's because When you put that much volume into the system develops stronger and stronger filters to filter out the noise. Okay, this spray and pray approach is a mistake. It causes too many applications to enter the system that then forces the recruiters to use more stringent filtering tools. Okay, that mass application methodology is why recruiters have to use more filters, because there are too many people applying, right? Even those who don't actually have the skills to apply, right? In that environment, it's going to be harder for you to stand out in the noise. So don't try and go where the crowd is going, right? You have to make it past the filter, right? If there's a bouncer at a nightclub and there's a huge line outside, you don't want to stand in that line, because by the time it's 2 a.m. and you're ready to go home, you probably haven't made it to the door. You need to find the other way in, okay, through the relationships that you build and so on and so forth. Okay, so to avoid this crowd, you need to understand and leverage the hidden job market. First and foremost, know that it exists. B, know that it's constantly being changed over and fresh opportunities come up, which means you need an active and a structured and a tailored networking strategy, a tailored informational interview strategy. You need to be able to identify companies in your area where your specific background could be an asset. Of course, it's going to take research. Of course, it's going to take effort. But hey, you didn't think career change was going to be easy, did you? So don't just apply, connect with people, okay? Reach out to engineers and recruiters on LinkedIn, but don't just be generic. Don't just say, hey, can you help me and give me advice? Nobody has time for that. Instead, reach out, and we teach this in the Inner Circle program, reach out with meaningful messages that signal you as a high value person in the job market, but also doesn't ask for anything, right? Because you're first earning the right to even be connected with. So that can, it often helps a lot to just attend virtual meetups, to show your face around so you become familiar, you become a known person, and then engage meaningfully with the people who are already doing what you want to do. It's easy to say in words and it's hard to concretize, which is why I keep telling people don't ask for tips. A lot of the things that really work take practice and skill and some sort of apprenticeship or mentorship so that you can be coached into it, right? Which is why I don't do the standard video courses thing, because 9 out of 10 people are not going to get a lot of value out of it, because you can just Google that, right? The real value comes in the customization to you and your environment, okay? So the trick here is to get noticed before you need the job. Well before you need the job, get noticed. Well before. By being proactive, by strategically engaging, this dramatically increases your visibility, your recallability, your reputation, and therefore your desirability. And will often allow you to bypass the initial screening filters that so many people get trapped in. Now, step 3, the final one, is that you have to transform yourself not just into a coder, but into a viable candidate that's interview ready, which means you need to bridge the gap from learner to very hireable professional. And that's a bit of a jump. Okay. So in this final step, what I want you to think about is that you need to motivate yourself or find somebody who'll keep you accountable by realizing that the end of the learning phase isn't just the end of something. It's the start of a truly rewarding new career if you can make that jump. Okay. And because people have made it and people make that jump every day, therefore it's possible. It's not impossible. Now, the only question is how. Okay. So this step of making that leap and the others before it are all laddering up to ensure that you don't just know how to code. You're not just one of the millions of people who learned how to code but didn't get hired for it. You know how to be a software engineer. You've got to be the thing that you're trying to be next as a professional. Okay. You cannot get hired as an engineer if you aren't already acting and being like one and running your life like one. This means that your technical skills are just one piece of the puzzle. Okay. You need to develop a meaningful and winning interview strategy that makes you hireable, that makes you winnable, and that covers not just the technical problem solving, of course you need that, but also the behavioral stuff, the communication stuff, understanding cross-functional collaboration in corporate structures, and even how to demonstrate your learning agility and cultural fit to that team, which means you need to ask good questions. And if you don't come from a corporate background, you are at a slight disadvantage, but it's a learnable skill, right? Someone with a corporate background can explain to you what things mean, how to approach these situations. Heck, there are people that in my team that have been around for 10 years, and I still mentor them regularly on how to navigate the corporate workplace and how to do good work, be seen to be doing good work, and manage a career for the long term. Okay, because nobody cares about the job, guys. The job can come, the job can go, layoffs can happen. We've all been, most people I know have been laid off. I've been laid off. You stop worrying about the layoffs when you know that this is about a long-term career, and you build a career, not just the next job, which is what we teach people to do in the Inner Circle program. That's why we talk about a career transition, not just a job transition. Okay. Now, in the Inner Circle, we also pretty much convert every learning exercise that we do, more or less, into interview practice, right? We take every opportunity, just pretend it's an interview. And so we train our mentees to articulate their thought processes correctly out loud, which sort of is a constant simulation of what real interview scenarios are like. And then we constantly give them feedback on their recordings, on the techniques, on the tonality, on response structures, on the examples they use in the behavioral questions, everything really. Because Brian and I, we've been both successful candidates in our tech careers and hiring managers, and we've done the career change thing in our 30s, which all of these are not the easiest things to do, as you can appreciate, right? So we have this holistic approach, and we bring that holistic approach to prepare our students. So we empower our students to confidently navigate all sorts of interview challenges and repeatedly demonstrate that they're not just a coder, but a valuable asset to the team, and they're ready to contribute meaningfully from day one. So you're not a liability, you're an asset, okay? Now, I know this is getting on a bit, so let me quickly recap what we've talked about today. We've discussed why career changers often struggle to land actual coding jobs, and we kind of boil it down to 4 main reasons, right? Reason number 1 is you're up against very experienced engineers, and you need a strategy to level the playing field, or at least compare favorably with them in the eyes of the hiring manager. Reason number 2 is that interviews are complex and diverse. There are 9 to 14 different types that I've counted in the tech world so far, and they go well beyond just the coding and solving some problem, or doing some React app, or a DSA question or something. They require proper preparation for each of those different types, those 9 to 14 different types of interviews. Each of them require different preparation strategy. Reason number 3, the spray and pray approach helps no one. In fact, it doesn't just suck, it actually makes it worse for you. Okay, mass applying to jobs without a clear targeted strategy and an intentionality is pointless and arguably even counterproductive. Reason number 4 is that zero strategy means that you're flying completely blind, which is as good as guessing, and therefore that dramatically reduces your odds, because a successful career change is a time expensive thing, and you don't have time to lose when you're already mid-career, right? So it requires a deliberate and a strategic and intentional campaign tailored to you and your target market, your goals. So it's not saying that you just do A, B, C. There's no formula, but there is a route. Okay, there's no formula to get to London, but there is a route. If you're north of London, you have to go south. If you're east of London, you have to go west. Okay, so no 2 maps will work for the same people. So it has to be boiled down to you, which is kind of why I did the customized coaching and the mentorship program anyway, right? So it's not enough to just learn a little and apply a lot. You've got to learn a fair bit, and then you've got to have the right plan, the right roadmap. So you just have to follow along. Now, at a high level, I also outlined for you in this episode 3 steps that will help you succeed. 1 is de-risk yourself in the eyes of the hiring manager. Show them that at the very least, you're not an unsafe bet, which is how you appear as a career changer, okay? And remember, transferable skills are not as great as you think they are. They're only the icing on the cake if it matters to the chef, okay? Not all icing is relevant to the chef, okay? Not all transferable skills are relevant to the hiring company, and it won't count for diddly squat if you don't actually have strong coding skills, at least equivalent to the competition, okay? Because after all, coding is the core skill, right? And that's not something you have a track record in at the time when you're applying as a career changer. Okay, step 2 is understand that there is an entire hidden labor market out there, the informal job market. Leverage it, master it through active relationship building and strategic engagement with the right people and the right hub and spoke strategies, okay? Step 3 is you need to transform yourself not just into someone who's learned to code, but someone who's an engineering ready candidate, an interview ready candidate, okay? You got to develop and practice the winning interview strategies for that type of interview that works for you and that demonstrates to the hiring manager that you're an engineer, not just a coder, okay? So remember, guys, you have to master the entire career change process, not just the coding bit, because that is what career change is about. Is your career change is only successful not when you've learned to code. Your career change is successful when you've got the job offer. That's the winning point, okay? So if you're serious about accelerating your journey and you want a proven roadmap, one that's customized to you, that cuts through all the noise and the social media BS, and you want to build a long-term meaningful career, not just the next job, you want a career that gives you joy and meaning, financial comfort, opportunity, then by all means, check out the Inner Circle program and also my free newsletter. Links are in the description, okay? Cool, I'll see you next time. Thank you, bye.
Just subscribe. You know you got to do it.